So we have a little handheld video going on today. So the drawers are finished, except for the large one. The stock you can see sitting up on top there, the sides and the back. But the lower 6 drawers are all set to go. So the front of the large drawer is over here. And we've got the pattern that I took off of the plan, of course, right here. This shell is a little bigger than the shell that was done on the door and has a little different shape. This is the shell that's on the door, and this is the shell that we're doing on the drawer front. So it has more lobes to it, and of course it's wider, but it's about the same depth as that one was. So, although this piece of drawer front is 1 1/8 thick, so it should actually be a little deeper. So I'm starting to carve it here, and it's coming along, so we'll be at it a little while. Well, it's time to start on the convex shells now. I've got 2 of them to do. So this is a cutout of the drawing that I have of the shell that's on the Townsend bureau. And I also have this plaster cast, which is on some of the Townsend bureaus have this design down here. But the one we're reproducing right now has the cross hatching down in that area there, so it is slightly different, but we're going to put the cross hatching on. So what I've done so far is I've got a piece of pine here to hold it to, so I can clamp it for carving. And what I've got to do, I traced the pattern from the drawing on there with carbon paper, of course, and then I cut out the circle that there is that goes from edge to edge here, and you'll see that it's slightly flat here. The shell pattern is not a perfect circle. It's shorter here, so I'll probably end up extending it a little bit rather than having that flat top on it. It's screwed on in the back here, and then I bandsawed along here so that the piece of pine here will catch the carving chisels as we round this over. I put a dado in here, which is 1/4 of an inch, which leaves 3/4 of an inch, which is the size of the blocking. This is the blocking here. This is should be 1/4 of an inch there, and the blocking pattern is marked on the bottom here, so I've got to carve that off. So this material up in this area will be carved out, and then of course you have up, down, up, down, up, down all the way around. So the first thing to do is that this shell is curved over here. As you can see from this, this shell here, by the way, is a little even smaller yet. So I've got another circle on here to where I want to start the curve to come down. So the first thing to do is to take out all this material along the top, as well as the drawing. We'll have to put it back on again. But to carve, or not carve, I could carve it, probably use a spoke shave to curve this over. So that's what we're going to do now. So with this board on here, I'll be able to clamp it in a vise on the bench and be able to work on that. Working on the convex shell here, and all of this has to be rounded over to this template that I have. So I've got the spoke shave here, and Well, I've got it rounded over now and put the pattern back on. You can see I extended it down into the curve, and I've got it marked which are up and which are down, and I started to shade in here all the downs so that I wouldn't make a mistake, but I've got to do that all the way across. And the first thing to do is, in my case, what I'm doing is I'm starting to round over what is the blocking here, and I had traced that onto the bottom here from the actual drawer that it's going to sit above, so that the blocking here would match the blocking over there. So I'm carving this out over here, and then shortly I'll be carving out all of this so that it looks like the blocking comes up with the shell. Then I'll take a V-chisel and start to define all of the rays that there are. Well, I'm working on the second shell here, and the reason is that the first shell was not good enough. We had a lot of chip outs here and there, and the veins in the shell aren't right. They're not flowing, and in general it was a good practice one. So I started on a second shell here, and so far I got about half of it done, and it's going much better, much less chip out. And so we're working on, I'm working my way around the shell, and what I do is I do a round over here and then do the in shell here, and what that does is allow me to carve this vein, which has very delicate edges on it, and you don't want to bump them after you do it. So we do the round one and then do the inside one with the very fragile edges on it. So I'm rounding this over here with a 4, long size 4. And since I'm going straight down here, you don't have to worry about the grain direction on this particular part of it. And I've got a piece of pine underneath here to support the bottom, because what does happen is that, like when you plane at the edge of a board, and that it does chip out down here, so this helps support it so we don't get as many chip outs on the bottom, although it still happens. But you can see it's starting to round over there a little bit. But up here, you've got to look at the grain. So on this side of the ray, we can go this way along there to round it over. Like so. And then on this side you have to go this way. So it's starting to get there. Anyway, you get this round, and then this one will hollow out. Well, we have this rounded over now, and a little chip out here, courtesy of the grain just lifting up, and I super glued it down, and I'll clean that up later. So I've started on the inward shell or ray now, and I've got a 1/2 inch number 7 here, and you can see that the edges are starting to form, but this has to go, it's way too high. And we want to be careful with the edges. And you can hear the grain crunching. But you get the idea. This has got to come down like that one. And we just have to be very careful with the edges here. And then I'll take an 8 shortly to hollow it out. But this has got to go back quite a bit further yet. And I think this chisel needs sharpening too, because it's a little too tough. Well, I've got all the shell rays carved now, as you can see, all the way around. But now comes the, for me anyway, the more nerve-wracking part, where we get a chance to ruin it. Ooh, too close there. So now they all have to be flattened in here so that they, I don't know why they did that. I guess to get more shadows. And it's a good chance to break them off. But you can see this has not been carved up here, and this has been flattened here. And we'll try and do this. So this is a good chance. You want your chisel to be absolutely as sharp as you can get it. And you get the idea here of how they're supposed to be flat instead of pointy like they are now. So I have to do that all the way around. Well, I finally finished one shell with all my interruptions and whatnot. We got one acceptable shell here. And it's pretty nice. It came out, so we got one more to go. I'll zoom in here. I'll let you see it. So I cleaned it up a bit, but it's definitely acceptable, this one. So we got one more to go.